I'd like to welcome everyone to our second program in the US DOT Project Delivery Center of Excellence Thought Leadership Series on delivering the benefits of the bipartisan infrastructure law. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us for this session, which will focus on best practices to get big infrastructure projects off the ground. I'd like to welcome today's speakers, Stephen Sigmund, Chief of Public Outreach for the Gateway Development Commission, and Jessica Mefford-Miller, Chief Executive Officer of Valley Metro in Metropolitan Phoenix. We greatly appreciate both of you taking the time out of your busy schedules to contribute your perspectives to this thought leadership series. At the end of Stephen and Jessica's talks, we're going to have a moderated question and answer session. Please put your questions in the Q&A box and we will get to as many of them as we can. Also, just as a reminder, it's really helpful if you post your organization when you pose a question. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Christopher Coase, the Acting Undersecretary of Transportation Policy at the U.S. Department of Transportation, who previously served as the Assistant Secretary for Transportation Policy prior to stepping up to this role. The Undersecretary heads up key pieces of DOT's project delivery apparatus, including Policy Office, which leads the work on grants for Secretary Buttigieg, the Build America Bureau, the Complex Projects Team, and DOT's Research Office, which includes the Volpe Center and this Project Delivery Center of Excellence. Christopher, the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, thank you, Stephanie. And again, thanks, Stephen and Jessica. I am really excited to hear about the amazing work you guys are doing. And to all of you, good afternoon. It's really a pleasure to be here, especially as we near the third anniversary of the passage of the historic bipartisan infrastructure law. I just want to first thank you all for the great work you guys are all doing on delivering the promise of the bipartisan infrastructure law and making sure your projects stay on time, on task, and on budget. It's really been an all of DOT effort to deliver on this promise of what is a generational investment to rebuild America's infrastructure, our communities, and enhance our competitiveness. In short, getting ready to win the next create the next American century. It's really been a privilege to have a front seat to all of this amazing work. As Stephanie mentioned before, when I was Assistant Secretary for Transportation Policy, I worked really close with my colleagues in Congress to shape the legislation, which has now become known as the bipartisan infrastructure law, but then also helped shape the process of putting out not only on our funding notices, carefully selecting meeting grants, and what you'll hear today, putting in place the resources to get much needed projects actually built. Now, as the Acting Undersecretary of Transportation for Policy, a lot of words, just say Acting Undersecretary in short, we at DOT recognize that there's so much critical work necessary to implement this amazing legislation. The Volpe Center, which is actually home to our Project Delivery Center of Excellence, is also, as Stephanie mentioned, in the Undersecretary office. We have our Build America Bureau. We also have our Office of Aviation and so many programs now, which are particularly our Build America Bureau, which has now created so many programs to support local governments and community organizations who are trying to get technical assistance and project development assistance to advance these amazing projects and ideas. The size of our investments, as you all know, is enormous. Focusing just on our discretionary grants alone, we have made available over $11 billion in discretionary funding from key programs, more than twice the amount over the last 4 years combined. Increasingly, those grants are turning to groundbreakings, and increasingly, those groundbreakings are even turning to ribbon cuttings, rebuilding and modernizing our roads, our bridges, transit, railways, ports, and airports. The magnitude of this law is nothing we have ever seen before. Taking a step back, we have over 60,000 projects underway. 57 of those projects are being built and funded through this infrastructure law. We have now supported the repair and improvement over 175,000 miles of roadway. Over 500 projects have been funded to support 160 tribal nations. We've modernized 500 ports and waterway projects. We have over 1,100 public transit projects underway. Of course, I can't help but mention we have 1,100 airports now underway, modernizing their terminals, their operations, and their runway infrastructure. But more importantly, we've now given over 1,400 communities in all 50 states to fund roadway safety initiatives to ensure that no one, whether you're a driver, a cyclist, or pedestrian, should be fearful of their lives on those roadways. Look, the projects that we're building in some of the America's smallest communities, largest cities, and rural towns and tribal communities. Some of them are nationally or even regionally significant, but every last one of them matter to the communities that are often have waited too long for infrastructure investments that can improve their community, their economy, and their quality of life. And that's why today's panel is going to focus on two such projects. I just want to take a moment to highlight one of them, the Hudson River Tunnel being delivered by the Gateway Development Corporation. Because this project is a really great example of how the Biden-Harris administration and DOT, under the leadership of Secretary Pete Buttigieg, has systematically and strategically focused on delivering projects that truly matter. When I started back in January 2021, that project was mired in NEPA review, had no meaningful funding commitments from the federal government. We knew at that time that the federal role would have to be substantial, given the cost of the project, but also the regional and national benefits it would deliver. So we started off early by getting the NEPA process completed so the tunnel project would be in the best position not only to accept federal funding, but also to quickly obligate and spend those funds. Once the bipartisan infrastructure law was passed, DOT was not only able to combine substantial resources from 6 different funding programs to make the project a reality, making it the largest project funded by the Department of Transportation in our department's history. The Federal Transit Administration moved the project through its Capital Investment Grants Program and signed a $6.9 billion full funding grant agreement. Also, the Federal Railroad Administration awarded, which was recently obligated, a $3.8 billion grant under its Fed-State Partnership for Interstate Passenger Rail Program. And if that wasn't enough, the Build America Bureau within my office also closed 3 railroad rehabilitation and improvement financing loans totaling $4.1 billion, providing the project with the financial support at below market interest rates. Again, the Hudson River Tunnel is not only the largest project DOT has funded, but it perhaps is probably one of the most complex infrastructure projects ever built. And that is why the Project Delivery Center of Excellence is part of DOT's commitment, not just to fund and break ground on critical investments like the Hudson River Tunnel, but to work with project sponsors across the country to improve the delivery of those projects. Good project delivery is not just about keeping projects moving on time and on budget, which you all agree is important, but it's also ensuring that these projects bring the benefits to the communities they serve, whether it's creating good union-paying jobs, building generational wealth, reducing emissions, improving equity, and giving and engaging the communities that they're located in with the respect they deserve. Look, I'm looking forward to hearing from our panelists and continuing this dialogue with all of you who shares DOT's commitment to real leadership and project delivery. With that, thank you. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Back to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Christopher. That was a great way to kick off the panel and a great introduction to our first speaker, who is Stephen Sigmund, the Chief of Public Outreach at the Gateway Development Commission, which is a public authority and a government-sponsored authority. Stephen is responsible for all public communications on the nation's most urgent infrastructure project, which is modernizing and repairing the 114-year-old rail tunnel that links New York and New Jersey and the rest of the Northeast Corridor. He also served as Chief of Public and Government Affairs for the Port Authority of New Jersey and New York, where he was responsible for all external affairs around the rebuilding of the World Trade Center. Stephen, take it away, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Undersecretary, for that introduction. There's no pressure at all on a project that has this much federal investment in it. As you all spoke about, we are the Gateway Development Commission, which is a bi-state commission established by legislation in New York and New Jersey, a partnership of those 2 states and Amtrak to effectuate and get funded and built the Gateway program, and most especially the centerpiece of that program, the Hudson Tunnel project. Next slide. Next slide. So the project, as the Undersecretary alluded to, and Stephanie also added, is it's really sort of three projects in one. It is the modernization and building for the first time in 114 years, two new tracks and tubes, 4.5 miles from just east of Secaucus Junction in New Jersey, all the way to directly to Penn Station in New York. And then a full rehabilitation of the existing 114-year-old tunnel, one track in and one track out. And the reason we're doing this is because the entire Northeast Corridor, which carries 800,000 passengers a day, is 4 or 5 or 6 tracks all the way up and down from Washington to Boston. The one place where it necks down to one track in and one track out is the busiest part of the corridor and the 10 miles between Newark and New York. And so that has been true for 114 years. The existing tunnel, has done more than its job and continues to serve 200,000 passengers and 450 trains a day. But it is long past time that we modernize that system. And ultimately, what we are doing is building a system so that there are 4 good as new tracks and tubes that run between New York and New Jersey and free up that chokehold and free the flow between Washington and Boston from this critical fracture point. So ultimately, we will have 2 new modernized tubes and 2 fully rehabilitated tubes that can last passengers, the region, and the nation for the next 100 years. Next slide. And then a little bit about the need, as you see on the upper left-hand corner there, that was the technology that built the existing tubes that are still in service today, right? That was modern state-of-the-art technology in the days of Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt. And we are still using it today. And in 114 years, that tunnel has had some things happen, including Superstorm Sandy in 2012, which inundated the entire tunnel with water and still has significant impacts every day on the electrical systems and the concrete and the ballast. And so the tunnel, the existing tunnel, when it experiences delays, it experiences the problems that anything that's 114 years old and is in such heavy use every day experiences. And when you have to shut down one of the tubes, you don't lose half the capacity, you lose 75% of the capacity. So the Regional Plan Association did a study a couple of years ago that showed that without building the new tunnel, and if even we had to do a planned 4-year shutdown to rehabilitate one tube at a time, you would end up with a $16 billion loss to the GDP, 33,000 jobs lost per year, 250,000 drivers who would have 30-minute longer commutes and already the most congested part of the nation. And you'd add 2 million tons of CO2 into an already overheated atmosphere. So we've needed this project for a long time, and it's taken a long time to get where we are today. Next slide, please. And the project will not just have benefits to the riders, right? 200,000 riders a day and 800,000 up and down the Northeast Corridor who suffer from the delays that the current tunnel experiences, because not only do the riders experience hours-long delays, but it ripples up and down the entire corridor. It will also have significant economic benefits as it's being built and when it's built. Almost 100,000 jobs, 20 billion in economic activity. Already the $1 billion we've awarded in construction contracts are creating thousands of jobs and almost $1 billion in labor income. So it's already having the benefits economically that it will carry forward. Next slide. So this was a 15-year process to get here. So in 16 minutes, I really don't even have enough time to go through the processes the Undersecretary talked about, but I'll do a little bit. Next slide, please. There was a predecessor project called Access to the Region's Core that was approved and funded, and it was canceled really when a new governor of New Jersey came in, and it really wasn't his project, and so he canceled it. Amtrak picked up that ball and started the conversations about the Gateway project and Gateway program really very soon thereafter. And there was some momentum towards it. The first 2 sections of the concrete casing, which I'll talk about, were built between 2013 and 2018. But then there was another administration in Washington that was not favorable to the project, and it was held up. The funding for the entire federal government was threatened over this one project. In 2018, the FTA gave the project a medium-low rating so that we would not qualify for federal funding. And the EIS, as the undersecretary pointed out, was held up for a long period of time. So what did we do during that period of time? Next slide. We continued to talk about this project and continued to build the need for the project, right? We did things like reports on how much delays there were, 2,000 hours a year that people were experiencing from them. We helped establish a coalition called the Build Gateway Now Coalition that did things like a count up clock on the EIS for how long the EIS was taken, and we even we resorted to some gimmicks like when the tunnel was 108 years old, we did a delay cake. Right, as you can see on the left, with riders with their hands on their heads, emphasizing that the project was needed and held up. Next slide. We also continued to build the political need. Right, we continued to cultivate champions in DC and in the states. In particular, the Majority Leader Schumer, who helped get the funding for, as you see on the bottom left, the original 2 sections of the concrete casing that have already been built, and that picture was taken before the Hudson Yards development was done on the east side, the east side of Hudson Yards as it is today. And we continued to work with our delegations to make sure they continued to push for this. Both rhetorically and in federal budgets to put money aside for it. And ultimately, as a new administration came in 2021, really ramped up the need conversation and the need for movement on the project. Next slide. And so the tide really turned in 2021, as the undersecretary pointed out, and it's important to note, given this conversation, that this project could not have happened without the IIJA. I mean, we ended up with $12 billion in federal grants and $4 billion in loans, in federal loans, that the states are paying back to comprise the local share. So we have ended up with a 70-30 split between the federal government and the local governments that has allowed this project to go forward. And it is an historic investment by the federal government. And that was all due to the IIJA. We built this organization from the ground up, from having 6 employees to nearly 50, so that we could make it real and clear that we could deliver on this project and get FTA's designation as an eligible recipient of federal funding. And we adopted a delivery partner model, partnering with a private sector consortium that's brought over 300 other employees to provide arms and legs and expertise of decades and hundreds of years of transportation, administration, financial, legal, public affairs expertise, so that we can deliver on this project. And we've started the project moving, as you see from the groundbreaking on the right. Next slide. So that gets us to where we are today. Next. As the undersecretary mentioned, we are fully funded, which is really an amazing accomplishment. Almost $7 billion in the CIG grant. Again, that the CIG money that was available was much more significant due to the bipartisan infrastructure law. 800 million of that is already available and obligated to the project. Simultaneously closing on the largest RIF loan in history, so that could comprise the local 30% share of the project between New York and New Jersey, who are paying back those loans at low interest rates. And the Federal State Partnership Grant, a program that didn't exist before the bipartisan infrastructure law. We were awarded almost $4 billion from that project, including, once we signed and executed the agreement 2 weeks ago, another $2 billion that's already obligated. So together with the 800 million, we have almost $3 billion that's obligated already to this project and can be used against both the existing construction and the contracts we are awarding this year. Next slide. And most importantly, the work started. We are finally, after 15 years, building this project. On the left, you see the Tonley Avenue Bridge project in New Jersey, which will ultimately open up under that roadway and allow for the tunnel boring machines to go into the west side of the Palisades, and also will ultimately the tracks will go through there. The surface tracks will go through there and connect to the tunneling portion, which is just to the right by those trees. On the far right, the Hudson Yards concrete casing section 3 is the cut and cover section that's really the missing link between the two sections that were already built and where the tunnel boring machines will come in Manhattan. And once that cut and cover is constructed and the tracks and signals, et cetera, are put through there, it will be the missing link that ultimately directly connects passengers into Penn Station. And in the middle, we are in the midst of a project called the Hudson River Ground Stabilization, which is a very innovative project because when the tunnel comes up on the west side of Manhattan, it gets shallow to the bottom of the Hudson River. The bottom of the Hudson River is a consistency that's described like chocolate pudding. So if you tried to put a tunnel boring machine through there without doing this work, it would collapse on top of the tunnel. So what we are doing is shoring up the bottom of the river and stabilizing it with a mix of concrete, soil, and water columns that will create a strong foundation for the tunnel boring machines to come through. So those three projects together mean we are working in New Jersey, working in New York, and working in the river itself with serious, significant projects going on that are actually building this tunnel. Next slide. And a month ago, we awarded the work for the first tunnel boring machines. And that was the section that's about a mile section you see on your right through the Palisades. It's at a depths of about 75 feet to 250 feet. It's about which will connect the western side of the tunnel all the way to Hoboken and Weehawken, and then you'll pull those tunnel boring machines out, put in new tunnel boring machines because you need a different, essentially, drill bit to go from drilling through rock to drilling under the water. So those tunnel boring machines will then launch and connect with Manhattan. But this contract has been awarded. These tunnel boring machines will now be built, custom built for this project, and they will launch in the coming year. Next slide. And in 2025, the work continues in a very serious way. We'll complete that Tonley Avenue project, launch the tunneling contracts in Palisades, as I said, and award the Manhattan Tunnel project, which is a connection essentially between the Manhattan bulkhead and the 12th Avenue shaft, and getting the tunnel boring machines ordered and in production and here and ready to go. And we'll award the work on the trackway construction in New Jersey, because it's not just a tunnel, it's 2 miles of tracks that go from just east of Secaucus Junction all the way to that Tonley Avenue bridge that I showed you before. Last slide, please. And just sort of lastly, the key takeaways. This is a long project. These projects are hard, they're long. Nobody's done this in 114 years. And it goes through a lot of cycles, as I showed you. And it goes through political cycles, it goes through up and down economic cycles. And so there's a lot you have to do to keep the project moving. One, engaging your elected representatives, particularly those who represent the constituencies that are directly affected, right, in New York and New Jersey, who experience those delays and quality of life problems. And you work with them. And even during the bad times, we had monthly updates with those representatives. They had letters of support and testimony and questions at hearings, et cetera. We also, build a broad coalition of supporters, again, who are going to, benefit from the work ultimately. The business leaders who need people to come in and out of Manhattan, labor partners who are going to do the work itself, and you keep them engaged as well. There's a group called 825 operating engineers who are going to actually operate the boring machines. They worked for 6 years practicing out in New Jersey. And we, kept in contact with them and kept reporters connected to them to let them know that work was going on. And you create an organizational structure that allows you to tap into partnership resources and funding. We are a partnership between New York and New Jersey and Amtrak, and we include the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey and New Jersey Transit and Amtrak's, building an operational expertise to bring all that together to get this incredibly complex project done. And then sort of easy to say, but harder to do, just keep your head down and keep working, right? Even when this goes through difficult political cycles, good times and bad times, you just keep progressing and keep moving forward, because ultimately, this is a really complicated, long, expensive project that takes a long time. And so you just have to keep moving, and eventually it will be finished. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I appreciate and look forward to any questions, and I hope I didn't go too long.
Thank you. Well, thank you. You didn't go too long. You did a great job, and we'll come back to those 4 takeaways because I think they raise some really interesting questions for us. So thank you very much. But before we get to questions and answers, I would like to introduce our next speaker, who is Jessica Mefford Miller, the Chief Executive Officer at Valley Metro and a leader in safe, reliable, and accessible public transportation. In her current post, Jessica is responsible for the operations, maintenance, and expansion of the regional public transportation system for Metro Phoenix. Expansion of the system during Jessica's tenure includes nearly $2 billion in capital projects, the opening of the Valley's first streetcar in Tempe with a hybrid battery and off-wire propulsion system along a portion of the 3-mile route. And as a gateway to the West, at the beginning of this year, the light rail system was expanded 1.6 miles to Northwest Phoenix, including the first rail-only bridge over the I-17 freeway and elevated station at Metro Parkway. So Jessica's going to tell us more about all these great projects, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for that warm introduction, and thank you to the Deputy Undersecretary. Well, good morning. I want to share with you what I think are some of Valley Metro's best practices in developing our rapidly expanding regional transit system. Next slide, please. I think part of our keys to success, I'll walk you through at a very high level, some of our funding history, the history of our local elected leadership that has been foundational to our rapid expansion. I'll talk about our relationships with our funding partners. In our case, it's Federal Transit Administration, which I think is so important to the progress we've made, and then early and ongoing collaboration and engagement with our stakeholders and members of the public. Next slide, please. But first, let me give you a snapshot into the Phoenix metropolitan region in the Valley Metro system. We are the regional public transportation authority in Maricopa County. We're home to about 4.5 million people. We're consistently one of our nation's fastest growing counties. And to support that growth, we have made major investments in infrastructure, including transit, over the last 40 years. Our median age is 35, so we're a relatively young region. A lot of those households moving to the Valley are young and are expecting a new and different means of transportation. Next slide, please. At Valley Metro, our mission is to connect communities and enhance lives. Everything we do, from planning, designing, building, operating, and maintaining our bus, light rail, streetcar, paratransit, and commute solutions program, is to support the people who live in our communities. Our system is vast. Valley Metro operates almost 100 fixed routes. We have 30 miles of light rail, and that 30 miles of light rail was largely developed over a 15-year period. Our oldest system is now almost 16 years old today, so we are aging even as we are rapidly expanding. Next slide, please. We have been very successful in securing federal dollars for transit projects in the Phoenix metro region. We have consistently delivered our projects ahead of schedule and within our budget. Our Northwest Phase 2 that opened earlier this year that Stephanie mentioned, that 1.6 mile, 3-station corridor opened ahead of schedule and under budget. And our South Central extension, that next rail line that's going to open in mid-2025, we hope to open that also on time, on scope, and within budget. Next slide. Let's take a quick look at our next slide, please. At our high capacity transit system, so you can get a visual idea of how the system has grown over time. That blue line, that solid line, is the existing Valley Metro light rail system. We began with an alignment that moved east from our East Valley and communities, including our Sky Harbor Airport, into downtown Phoenix. We opened that Northwest Phase 2 in January of 2024. We opened our first streetcar corridor that Stephanie mentioned. That project was delivered in May of 2022. That's our region's first streetcar expansion. We also have an expansion to that streetcar that's currently in design, and that planning and design work is being accelerated thanks in part to a RAISE grant award that we received this past summer for almost $16.9 million. And that's going to carry us all the way through preliminary design in NEPA and position position us to quickly submit a federal funding application. Our South Central extension, that's 5.5 miles. That's the kind of teal dashed line that will open in mid 2025. This is the first corridor that's going to move our now 1-line light rail system to a 2-line light rail system. So we will have a north-south operating alignment as well as an east-west alignment. So that moves our now 30-mile system to about 35.5 miles of light rail plus those 3 miles of streetcar. So we've moved quickly. Between 2022 and 2025, we will have opened 3 different New Starts funded rail corridors, which is an impressive feat in my view. And I'm happy to share what I think are some of our keys to success with you today. So here's the mix of local funding. And I think that this is important because this is critical to have in place before you ever engage in that federal funding process. Next slide, please. There we go. So locally, our largest source of funding is a regional transportation sales tax. It actually supports transit as well as highways, roads, and bridges. That was first enacted in 1980 and then renewed later on in 2005. And now it's due for renewal, actually 28 days from now on the November ballot. But who's counting? And that has been our local match for all of our capital investment. We've relied on federal funds, primarily capital investment grant funds, but we have also leveraged CMAQ and formula funds to deliver those projects. In the last administration, our budgets were reduced for Tempe Streetcar, Northwest Phase 2, and South Central Extension. So we tapped into our other federal formula funds. And on Tempe Streetcar, the business community around that 3-mile alignment actually elected to tax themselves to produce $16 million in revenue. That helped us deliver that project after our funding was reduced. Next slide, please. Some of the greatest success of our alignment is the tremendous amount of economic development and growth. For every dollar that we've invested in our capital program, we've seen over a 5-to-1 ratio. So I like that return on investment. And if you have the opportunity to tour the Valley Metro light rail system in Phoenix, you'll see in streetcar as well, there's a common view from every rail vehicle, and that's cranes in the sky that are building commercial development, lots of housing, retail, and expansion of our region's colleges and universities. Next slide. Leadership has been absolutely essential. Next slide. To the beginnings of our funding. Valley Metro is a relatively young organization. We were established in 1986 and really just began operating bus service and later paratransit service. Our local communities, after a regional tax failed, our local communities, including Tempe, Phoenix, and Glendale, elected to tax themselves to support transit. The city of Mesa also shares a portion of their transit revenue to support transit expansion and operations. Next slide, please. The beginning of Valley Metro Rail was actually in 2002, and we were established to plan, design, build, and operate rail service. Eventually, in 2012, Valley Metro Rail and Regional Public Transportation Authority merged. So the organization, as we exist today, is still very young. We're just 13 years old, but we are certainly fast moving. In 2015, in the city of Phoenix, there was an initiative that was presented to voters that aimed to actually kill light rail expansion in Phoenix. And that measure was handily defeated by voters, allowing us to continue expansion in the Phoenix region. So the politics of rail have been quite interesting in the state of Arizona and in the Phoenix region in particular. But time after time, more than 4 times, and hopefully a 5th time coming up here in 28 days, our voters will again elect to continue investment in our regional transportation system. Next slide. So in 2020, that's when we got that capital investment grant award for a South Central extension. In 2021, Northwest extension. So that's a 5-year timeline from award to delivery on South Central, and about a 3-year timeline from award to delivery on Northwest Phase 2. This is, I think, important to note. We're moving very quickly on each of these corridors, and we've got the projects really teed up to move quickly through planning, design, construction and delivery. I saw in the comments earlier a question about delays to awarding grants, and I think some of the onus truly is on the grantee to have your steps in place so that you're ready to move just as soon as an award is made. Next slide, please. So early and ongoing involvement, not just of our funding partners, but which I'm going to talk about in a minute, but of our community, I think has been a great part of the key to Valley Metro's success. Remember, we are a community where many people are embracing light rail and transit system expansion, but not everybody is. So we need friends and supporters. Next slide. Our public involvement and feedback, it begins very early on in every single project, and it's tailored to the specific project's need. So whether we're moving from planning or we're moving through project design or through construction and operations, we have key touch points. And we have actually created an organizational structure that allows us to support those key touch points. Next slide, please. We have a team of dedicated community relations coordinators. They're associated with every one of our capital projects, and their job is to act as a liaison between our contractors and our constituents. That's local business, that's community members, and then the Valley Metro team itself acts as that liaison to our local elected officials. We're providing updates and engagement on a regular basis. Next slide. Each of our projects also has a construction advisory board. And in the case of South Central, we actually have two different construction advisory board. It's a long corridor. One construction advisory board really just focuses on downtown Phoenix. And then the second focuses on the South Phoenix portion, which is most of the alignment by miles. And the CABs are really that on the ground team. They are embedded within the project corridor alongside Valley Metro staff. And our project delivery team, in the case of South Central, that is Kiewit, who's delivering the project. We've got field offices sprinkled throughout the corridor, and each of these teams are there working together, developing relationships, spending time with one another. And I think that has been really so critical to our success. For the first time on the South Central project, when we deliver it next year, we're actually going to transition from a construction advisory board to a structured Friends of South Central advisory board so that we're continuing those deep touch points with the community. At Valley Metro, we believe that a project really begins not when we break ground or cut the ribbon, but when we deliver that project back to the community and we begin revenue service. Next slide, please. Another tool that I think is a best in practice program is our business assistance program. Together with the City of Phoenix, we have a program that is designed to support our businesses' needs while we're impacting them. Valley Metro's rail corridors are nearly all entirely street running. And so that means with our construction projects, we're kicking up a lot of dust and making a lot of messes. It impacts access to businesses, which impacts their bottom line. And when you add to that the impact on local businesses of the pandemic during streetcar Northwest Phase 2 in South Central, our businesses need all of the support and engagement we can give them to be sure that they're here serving our communities when the project opens. Through the Business Assistance Program, we deliver services like marketing and advertising, business consulting. We schedule events to increase patronage. I think places like local restaurants along the corridor. And on South Central, about 88% of the businesses within a quarter mile of that corridor actually participate in the Business Assistance Program. And through a grant program funded by the City of Phoenix, to date, we've awarded over $1 million, next slide please, in business assistance grants. And this helps those small businesses through some of the challenging times when they may be experiencing a decline in revenue or patronage due in part to construction. Next slide, please. So thinking about, we'll go ahead and advance one more. Thinking about the customer experience throughout the project has really been key for us. Remember, our mission is connecting communities and enhancing lives, and delivering big infrastructure is just one of the ways that we are able to do that. So it's important never to lose sight of our mission by focusing on those customers. We regularly, next slide, have events and programs within the community that are intended to celebrate the diversity and the culture of those local communities. But it's also an important reminder for Valley Metro staff and for our project teams of who we're serving and why we're delivering these projects. Next slide, please. So federal partner trust and relationship building is paramount to delivering any federal projects. And I think it really has been a key to Valley Metro's success. We are very knowledgeable about FTA's processes. We factor each of those processes into our project scheduling. We strategically time our requests for entering project development, entry into engineering, and then ultimately our request for full funding grant agreements ensured that we're equipped to deliver the work according to that pre-specified timeline. We carefully plan the timing of each project phase, making sure not to spend too much time in design once we've actually begun the project development and entry into engineering process. And we get on point with our management plans. We establish agreements very early with our local partners, including a strong upfront funding approach that we are all committed to. Next slide, please. You know, all of these projects are ultimately approved by Congress. This is a dynamic process. We have seen a number of changes in our project budgets. I alluded to this earlier, even after the grants are awarded. So we always build some flexibility into the schedules and develop funding mechanisms and mitigation strategies to navigate critical path impacts. So we're always trying to anticipate what could happen, when could it happen, and what is our plan B in the event needed. We check in regularly with FTA, that includes FTA headquarters and our Region 9 staff on projects, upcoming milestones. We bring them our challenges. We are welcoming as ever to their questions. We view them as a collaborative partner and also a fantastic resource in supporting us through project delivery. And we think that transparency is just paramount in fostering these collaborative relationships. We have regular FTA quarterly, that's with our Region 9, and project management oversight meetings. We provide assessments of our successes and also identify our risks and challenge. We welcome their guidance, and we know that our federal partners are as invested in our success as we are. Next slide, please. In addition to our strong relationships with FTA, we deliberately build a project team that includes Valley Metro staff, our design partners, and our contractor partners. We invest in this team and our relationships early by clearly defining expectations related to priorities. This includes project quality, schedule updates, community engagement, disadvantaged business enterprise participation. Next slide. And with the Valley Metro team, you know, I think any good team is an evolving organism, and we reposition our team over time to make sure that we're meeting our current and near-term needs. And having the right people in the right positions on the bus, if you will, is absolutely critical to our success. And part of our successful team building approach has been investing in our talent. In fact, it's a key pillar of Valley Metro's strategic plan to invest in that team. We're cultivating the best and the brightest talent from the Phoenix metropolitan area, and we're also bringing in talent from across the country. We have dedicated programs to train and develop our staff. We provide access to peer agencies, and we're constantly keeping abreast of industry best practices. And then finally, I encourage leadership, empowerment, and demand accountability of all of our teams. That's Valley Metro, as well as our contract partners. On the contractor, next slide. On the contractor side of things, we've delivered our project through collaborative delivery methods. Several of our recent projects have been delivered through Construction Manager at Risk, or CMAR. We're also taking a fresh look at other alternative delivery methods, especially for our next light rail extension. That's our nearly 10-mile I-10 West project. We also are focused on on facilitated partnering sessions, this is a best practice that I really do recommend. And I recommend actually including facilitated partnering at the onset of a project. We have facilitated partnering on a quarterly basis at the field level and at the executive level. On our South Central project, we added facilitated partnering a little bit later in the project. And honestly, I wish we had established this from the very onset. We also include our local partners, in this case, at City of Phoenix, on our most recent 2 light rail projects. And our objective in facilitated partnering is really to quickly get to the root of our challenges, help our teams coalesce around our common goals and strategies. And it has been just absolutely essential for moving through big changes like significant change orders. Next slide, please. With our contract partners, very early in the delivery process, we begin a discussion on risk. We ensure that within our contracts, we're clearly identifying levels of responsibility for risk. Throughout the project, then, we are identifying and mitigating risk on an ongoing basis. And then just monitoring and open communication throughout is essential. Next slide, please. To keep us moving, and we do, in spite of setbacks with South Central, we've had significant archaeological digs. We had supply chain delays associated with the pandemic. We had workforce shortages. And through all of those strategies and partnering that I just have gone through in the last year, we've been able to really re-rail this project and get it back on budget and back on time. We do that through that partnering, but to keep the team enlivened, especially those frontline teams who, by the way, in Phoenix are working around the clock in record heat to deliver these projects quickly, we celebrate our milestones, our big milestones, our small milestones. When we complete storm drain installation or our last track pour, and we celebrated our last track pour on South Central just last week, final rail welds, we get the team together, safety records, and we celebrate those successes. Next slide. And we celebrate with the community. On South Central, we've hosted a number of, we call it fiestas on Central, and I look forward to continuing those after we deliver the project, because remember, at the end of the day, this is not Valley Metro's project. These projects belong back to the communities that we serve. Next and final slide, please. Key takeaways, I think, from the Valley Metro system, it's early long-term vision for the system is absolutely critical. Stakeholder engagement throughout each project stage, and it might sound a little bit like relationship counseling, the way I have described the Valley Metro and contractor engagement process, but it is just so critical for delivering projects on time and within budget. With respect to the federal process, you got to carefully plan each project stage, and for aspiring project sponsors who don't have a lot of experience delivering federally funded programs, use your partners in your federal agencies and engage your peers in the industry to learn more about best practices. And then finally, as I just mentioned, celebrate those wins. These projects can be a long slog. The community, the staff, and the contractors need those wins. That wraps my slides, and I would love to take questions now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate great presentations by both Jessica and Stephen, and particularly the focus on takeaways. So we have a bunch of questions in the chat. Not sure we're going to get to all of them. There's some of them are more about getting grants or understanding how much money there is left in grants. And I would just say 2 quick things about that. There is an online DOT bipartisan infrastructure law dashboard that gives some information on our grant programs and how much has been going out the door for each fiscal year. There is one of the points that I think Jessica made well is that applying for grants when you're ready to, move the project ahead is really important. And so on both the Center of Excellence website as well as the website for our DOT Navigator, which is really the website that's more focused on obtaining grants, there are some checklists around project readiness and project delivery readiness that folks who are listening in and thinking about being able to get funding, might want to take a look at. But I want to use the moderator's prerogative and ask a couple questions of both Stephen and Jessica. So both Valley Metro and Gateway Development are relatively young organizations, and you both talked about some really key organizational issues. So do you have any thoughts to share with our audience about how you build out a successful project delivery organization, and also how you work with your design and contracting partners? Jessica talked about sort of more collaborative methods. So maybe Stephen first and then Jessica.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I mean, I think I actually sort of echo what Jessica said in our presentation, which is, I think the thing we did more than anything else was relying on our partners, right? I mean, we have partners in the states of New York and New Jersey and Amtrak, and particularly the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey and New Jersey Transit, you know, who are the kind of transportation and building agencies within those states, who have decades of expertise in doing exactly what we're talking about doing in building and delivering on big projects. So, for example, you know, when we established, really ramped up the organization, we created what's called SEPs, right? Executing partners, who essentially are construction managers for various portions of the project that makes sense for them to be the construction managers on, right? So for the portion that is the 2 miles of track leading to the tunnel in New Jersey Transit is the SEP, right? They're sort of the interface between us and the contractors, and we kind of hold the accountability and the contracts and things at our level, and the interface with you all at DOT, and Transit, who has that expertise, you know, make sure that the project is delivered upon. The core and shell part of the tunneling project, the SEP, is the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, who connects things between New York and New Jersey all the time. And that's what this is, you know, a tunnel under the Hudson that connects New York and New Jersey, which the Port Authority has done over its 85 or 90-year history or whatever it is. The Hudson Yards concrete casing, the SEP, is Amtrak, right? And Amtrak was able to get early money before we even qualified as a young organization. Before we even qualified for federal money, Amtrak was able to get a mega grant from the bipartisan infrastructure law that has allowed the Hudson Yards concrete casing portion to go on, because Amtrak built the first 2 sections of the concrete casing, so it makes sense for them to be the construction manager in the 3rd section. So that's sort of the biggest thing I can use to take away in a young organization is utilize the expertise of your partners and try to integrate it into your organization.
Great. Jessica?
So our organization, because of our project cycle, it swells and shrinks over time. And so we're very deliberate about the talent that we bring in-house, and try to structure that in-house talent, the size of the team, the disciplines, the level of effort in each discipline, according to what we think we're going to maintain over time. But then we also engage in a number of different contracts. So we've got an overall project oversight contract. We engage through them with project managers, and within those project management firm, we've got specific project managers through different facets of the corridors, especially for our bigger projects like South Central. We contract for functions like project controls, which has been so critical at monitoring our budget throughout the course of the project. It's a requirement of FTA. I saw in the chat a question, how do you ensure the money is well spent? Well, of course, our federal partners have lots of policies regarding how you can and can't expend federal resources, and then they require that we have programs in place to track the expenditure of those funds, and we're accountable back to our federal partners through a number of structured reports and meetings that happen on a prescribed cadence. And then we have our in-house staff, who's ultimately responsible for managing our various contractors, whether that's contract management or our actual contract delivery partners, our contractors. The in-house staff that we have, we're steeped in every single discipline that we support: construction, design, capital planning. We've got an internal project controls team. And so they have that one-to-one counterpart with the consultant team And then finally, part of our project team is our city partners. Remember, we are building in the communities that we serve. And so we've got everything from inspectors to streets department staff who are embedded in the greater project team that help expedite some of those would-be delays and keep things moving very quickly. Some of our external partners even include entities like our local utilities, which are so critical when we're conducting digs. So it's quite a labyrinth. And by the way, as part of our FTA quarterly review process, every single quarter, we are providing an update to FTA on the composition of that project team, where those staff are embedded, and what the level of effort is.
Great, two great answers. Really appreciate that. So one question, so you was kind enough, Jessica, to answer one of the questions in the chat. Another question is for Peter Rogoff is, are your contractor teams seeing concerns about the availability of skilled labor as the size and number of your contracts and others in your regions ramp up? And if you are you doing anything? Are your organizations doing anything to think about how they can address labor issues, shortages?
So we spent a lot of time on that, obviously, in the New York, New Jersey region. Although we've been pretty lucky so far in terms of our ability to attract in multiple bids on our, the various packages and to meet the labor obligations. But on each of our projects, we do a project labor agreement, to ensure that skilled labor is operating under rules and is being compensated well. And those also include long-term apprenticeship programs within the PLAs, because ours is a very long project. It's a at least decade-long project, and the average age of construction workers around the New York area is 55 years old. And so, the talent at the moment is there. As the project gets bigger and over time, we need to make sure that talent is backfilled. And so those apprenticeship programs are connected directly through the unions and a direct pipeline to the projects themselves.
Great, Jessica?
So we have definitely experienced shortage of workforce, particularly in the skilled trades. And that hit us especially hard during pandemic, and it did slow our progress. Again, we're back on track and on schedule, but here's how we handle that. And the landscape of labor looks different in the Southwest, of course, than it does in the Northeast. So we have agreements with our contractors for labor, for certain amounts of hours, for development of workers in the skilled trades, as well as DBE participation. We have goals. We're a race and gender neutral state in Arizona, which is interesting. So we don't have requirements, but we do have goals. And in our kind of retrenching process over the last couple of years, we have been able to bring on more workers. We have been able to invest in more hours to move those apprentice workers to journeyman status. And then we also have commitments to employ a certain percentage of workers from the corridors that we're actually working in. And on our South Central project, which is primarily a Latino community, we have over 73% of our craft hours delivered by minority workers, which I think is fantastic, though our participation of women in skilled trades is certainly lagging. We celebrate that and we share that with the community because, again, while we're delivering infrastructure and service back to the community, part of our goal is actually delivering careers back to the communities that we're serving. And so I think we've got some good successes there.
Both great answers, and I wish we had more time for this conversation, but we are running out of time. I will mention that there's a question in the chat about public engagement. I think both of you addressed the importance of public engagement, and I will just note that one of the things that the Project Delivery Center of Excellence offers is a project delivery toolkit, and one of the sections of the project delivery toolkit is resources for best practices on engaging the community. I think there's a mistaken belief, and both of you addressed this, that maybe if you spend too much time with the community, it slows your project down. But I think you both made the point, it actually speeds your project up. So we really appreciate that. So we are out of time. I want to thank both Stephen and Jessica for wonderful presentations, as well as for great answers to our Q&A. I want to thank our audience for joining us. I want to remind folks that there's one final program coming up in this series. It's scheduled for Tuesday, October 22nd at 1 to 2:30 Eastern Time. It is going to focus on project acceleration for the public good. The speakers will be Maria Zimmerman, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy at USDOT, Jennifer Toth, the Director of the Arizona Department of Transportation, Stephen Rowe Lewis, who is the Governor of the Gila River Indian Community, and Kurt Kianaka, who's been working on the I-70 Floyd Hill project in Colorado. So thank you for joining us. I hope you'll join us for the next session. And thank you again to our speakers, and everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.